This is part 8 of the 802 cable hat knit along video series, and we are up to the very top of the hat, and you're going to either finish your hat off or go ahead and create a little Trinity knot topper. And let's talk about finishing the hat off first, and I'll demonstrate how to do that, and then we'll go on to doing that little Trinity knot topper. So when last we left the hat, at the end of part 7 of our video series, you had 8 stitches left on your needle or set of needles. And what you're going to do now is reduce that to 4 by simply knitting 2 together around the link. And what I would suggest doing is, if you're working with double pointed needles, go ahead and knit this all onto one needle. So you're going to knit 2 together. Do away with that needle. Knit the next 2 together. I split my yarn there. Let's do this right. Knit 2 together. Do away with that needle. Knit the next 2 together. Do away with that needle. Again, if you're on a cable needle, you don't need to do this. You're already there. And knit the last 2 together. That gets a little tight the first time through there. And now you are down to 4 stitches on one needle. If you would like to simply finish your hat off flat, what you will do is cut your working yarn, and pull it through 1 stitch at a time, all the way through, and pop that stitch off the needle, 1 at a time through your 4 stitches. Pull it tight, thread up your needle on a tapestry, thread up your working yarn on a tapestry needle, and stitch it around and then down into the hat and weave your end in. And you will be all done. If you would like to add a pom-pom to the top of the hat, then you would do exactly the same thing, but instead of weaving in that end, depending on your preferred method of putting on a pom-pom, I would cut a long tail from your working yarn. Go ahead, draw it through these stitches, pull it tight, stitch it around a few, and then leave it up to the top in order to use it to stitch on your pom-pom, whether it's a purchased pom-pom or one that you make yourself. But if you would like to proceed with the Trinity knot, you will move on to doing something called I-cord. Hopefully many of you have done this before. If not, here's another new knitting skill. Why do we call it I-cord? Well, actually the term I-cord is a little bit rude. It comes from an old book by that wonderful knitting designer Elizabeth Zimmerman, who is the person who taught many of us how to knit or how to expand our knitting skills. And she referred to it as I-cord because she called it idiot cord because it was so simple and repetitious. It is very much what you used to do with spool knitting as a child, where you had those little circles with the 4 hooks that you went around and around and around. But to do it as tubular knitting, you do it just on one needle. So you finished out your 4 stitches, and what you do is don't turn them around. Don't turn them around. If you turn it around, you'd go back across and you'd create a little flat piece of knitting 4 stitches wide. Instead, you want to leave your working yarn to the left, slide all those stitches back to the beginning of that needle, and take either the other end of your cable needle, if that's how you're working, or another double pointed needle, and go ahead and knit from the right. So you're going to knit these 4 stitches, and what you do is on that first stitch, pull that yarn good and tight. 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. Keep that yarn on the left and slide those stitches all the way back to the other end of the needle. And same thing again, you're going to knit 4 stitches. Yarn is on your left. Keep it there. Don't turn it around. Slide it all the way back to the other end of the needle and knit those 4 stitches again. And what you are doing is creating a tube. You're knitting around in a circle on one needle. And what it winds up creating is a little tube like this, little circular tube of 4 stitches. Now, if you were going to add a tassel instead of doing the Trinity knot topper, what you might do is knit 2 of those stitches together so that you have only 3 to create a little bit of a thinner hanging tab to put a tassel on the end of. If you like this nice thick one, you can continue with that, of course. But otherwise, if you're going to do a tassel, I like to thin this down a little bit to 3 stitches and then do it to whatever length you like, 5 or 6 inches, and put a tassel or even a pom-pom on the end of that if you'd like a hanging one. So let me show you how you tie this actually rather simple but fun Trinity knot topper. You take about your 5 inches or so of tubular knitting. When you get to the end of your tubular knitting, you simply cut a nice long thread, enough to be able to sew the ends in, and pull it through those 4 stitches that you have, and then pull it nice and tight, and there you have about 5 inches of tubular knitting. What you'll do is take where the tubular knitting leaves the hat, and that's your vertical component. You're going to fold your tubular knitting over and bring it in front. I've left my finger sticking there just so you can see it. You're going to bring it over, fold it in front. Tuck your end through. And I find it very helpful to keep the orientation of that vertical initial limb coming up out of the hat vertically. Then all you're going to do, that's just a simple overhand knot so far. To create the Trinity knot, you're simply going to take that end and tuck it back in underneath to run parallel to that vertical element. And I just pulled the loose end through. So all you're going to do is tuck that end back parallel with the vertical, tuck it under your little cross piece, and there you have the 3-lobed Trinity knot. Then you're simply going to take this loose end and thread it up on a tapestry needle, tack it down to that vertical element first, and then tuck it inside of that tube down into your hat and weave it in the top. So again, all you did, I'll tie it one more time just to show you. You're going to take your tube, fold it over, keeping this vertical element, bring it in front, tuck it through the hole, pull your end through, and go ahead and snug it up a bit so you got a little extra here. And all you're going to do is take that end and tuck it back in underneath of that cross piece so that it is parallel to the vertical element. You're just going to tuck it back in parallel to the vertical element, and that creates that little Trinity knot. Then thread up your tapestry needle, tack down that end, and then weave your ends in. And then you can even this up a little bit by pulling the lobes so that you get a nice rounded, even Trinity knot. I'll demonstrate that again on the green hat once I get through this this tubular knitting. One more time on the tubular knitting. Keep your yarn on the left, your working yarn, slide it down to the right hand point of your needle, knit straight across. Do not turn, but slide it, keep the yarn on the left and slide it down to the other tip of your needle and work across again. So go ahead and make a tube of about 5 inches long, and I'll tie that knot one more time. So we're back just to see that knitted topper one more time. I just wanted to show you, because I am a fan of tassels on hat, and this is a different hat that I knit with a floppy tassel attachment. And again, what I did here was I went to an I-cord, or a tubular knitting cord, went down to 3 stitches to make this hanging part a little bit thinner, and then put a big fluffy tassel on the end of it, or you could put a pom-pom on it as well. So if that appeals to you, I realize maybe this is a little odd, maybe this is an Addison County thing, but if you want a tassel, that's another option, is to go to an I-cord that's 3. But here on this green hat, to finish off with the Celtic Trinity knot, I finished up my tubular knitting. I left a bit of a tail, enough to sew from, and I started pulling that tail through by pull it through 1 stitch at a time, just as if you're knitting it, but then go ahead and pull it all the way through and pop that stitch off. I do it 1 at a time just to make sure that I haven't dropped a stitch in the process, and then when I'm done, pull it up nice and tight, and then you have finished that tube. Again, you'll take the vertical element, wrap this tube around, so fold it in half, bring it to the front, bring it from the back through the little hole, and then, keeping that vertical element, drop this tab down here and bring it back up parallel to that center. And here I'm going to pull my thread on through. So bring that back up parallel to the center. You're going to hide it behind that little center cross, that little crossbar. Thread up your tapestry needle, stitch that in and knot it, and then drop the tapestry needle down into the center of the hat and sew in your end around the center. And there is a completed Trinity knot, and then what you can do is pull out these lobes a little bit to fluff it up and give it some shape. And there you have completed your hat.